What if I told you the most dangerous truth about being a man isn't hidden in success, women, or wealth, but in the quiet terror you feel when you're alone with yourself? Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But here's the real question. What happens when a man doesn't have a why? This is where most men are today, drifting, numbing themselves with women, chasing validation, scrolling for dopamine, waiting for someone else to hand them purpose. They don't even realize they've been trapped in the herd, where comfort is king and silence is unbearable. And here's the part no one wants to admit. This emptiness you feel, this gnawing sense that you're wasting time, isn't an accident. It's a design. It's the result of living like everyone else. Nietzsche didn't write for the herd. He wrote for men like you, men who are standing at the edge of collapse, wondering why they feel invisible, why relationships fail, why chasing her approval only leaves them hollow. His truth is dangerous because it demands that you stop lying to yourself. It demands you look in the mirror and see not who you pretend to be, but who you actually are when no one's watching. And that's where this video begins. Because Nietzsche saw what most men deny, that the modern man's weakness isn't just laziness or distraction, it's dependence. Dependence on being liked, on being validated, on being chosen. And the moment you let anyone else decide your worth, you've already surrendered. This isn't going to be another feel-good pep talk. This is Nietzsche's hammer, smashing through the illusions you've built your life on. And if you can bear to hear it, if you can confront what most men run from, then you'll begin to understand the path Nietzsche left behind, the path that turns a man from prey into something far more dangerous. Few can handle this truth. The question is, will you? Most men don't realize it, but they live like cattle, packed tightly into the herd, grazing on distractions, never lifting their eyes to see the slaughterhouse ahead. And Nietzsche was ruthless in naming this truth. The herd man is safe, comfortable, and utterly powerless. Think about your daily life. You wake up, you scroll, you work a job you hate, you laugh at the same jokes, you parrot the same opinions everyone else does. You're careful not to stand out, careful not to offend, careful not to break the invisible contract of conformity. On the surface, you belong. But inside, you feel suffocated, restless, empty. Because deep down, you know the herd is killing you. Nietzsche contrasted this with the figure he called the sovereign man, the one who creates his own law, sets his own standard, and carries the weight of his life without needing the herd's approval. The sovereign man doesn't ask permission to exist. He doesn't need to be chosen. He doesn't wait for applause. He builds his own measure of value and lives by it, even if it isolates him. Especially if it isolates him. Look around today. Men are terrified of isolation. They chase followers, likes, women, even meaningless hookups, anything to feel included. But Nietzsche saw inclusion as a kind of slavery. He warned, insanity in individuals is rare, but in groups, it is the rule. In other words, the herd is always insane. And if you're inside it, you will live insane too, weak, dependent, and invisible. History proves this. Rome didn't collapse because of barbarians at the gate. It collapsed because men abandoned discipline, truth, and sovereignty for bread, circuses, and comfort. The herd wanted pleasure, safety, and distraction. The sovereign man, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, even Nietzsche himself, always knew that suffering and solitude are the fire that forges strength. Here's the part you can't escape. If you feel hollow, if you feel weak, if you feel unseen, it's not because you were born that way. It's because you've lived as part of the herd. And until you step out of it, you will keep feeling exactly the same. Nietzsche's brutal message to men was simple. You either rise as sovereign or you decay as herd. There is no third option. And this is why the next section matters, because the herd isn't neutral. It has a hidden mechanism that keeps men enslaved without even knowing it. And that mechanism is female validation. Nietzsche warned that when men abandon their inner sovereignty, they become prey to whatever offers them comfort. And nowhere is this more obvious than in today's validation economy, an entire system designed to exploit the very wound that makes you crave her approval. Think about it. Why do dating apps exist? Not to help you find love, not even to help you find sex. They exist to keep you chasing, swiping endlessly for the dopamine hit of a match, a digital nod of approval. You're not building intimacy, you're gambling for validation. And every second you spend pulling that slot machine lever, someone else is getting rich. Social media? Same trap, different disguise. Men curate their lives, filter their photos, flex in the gym mirror. All for what? A like, a comment, a heart from a woman they may never meet. The validation isn't even real anymore. It's pixelated, automated, and still, it controls you. Nietzsche would call this the herd morality of the digital age. Millions of men moving in unison, hungry for attention, terrified of being ignored. But it goes even deeper. Look at the entertainment industry. Entire songs, movies, even advertisements are built on your hunger for her approval. Every romantic comedy, every pop anthem whispers the same lie. You're incomplete until she says you're worthy. And men believe it, shaping their identity around a story that was sold to them, not chosen by them. And here's where Nietzsche's hammer comes crashing down. The validation economy works only because you refuse to confront your emptiness. You'd rather numb it with likes, swipes, or sex than sit alone and ask the brutal question, who am I without her approval? Society isn't just selling you products. It's selling you yourself, packaged through her eyes. Buy this car, wear this cologne, build this body, and she'll validate you. And every time you fall for it, you trade away another piece of your sovereignty. Let's make it real. Why do you think OnlyFans exploded? Not because men are starving for naked women. The internet already provides that for free. It exploded because men are starving for personal validation. The illusion that she sees you, that you matter. And millions of men are paying rent not for sex, but for the fantasy of being chosen. Nietzsche would laugh bitterly at this slavery, because the validation economy is the modern church. It offers you salvation, but only if you keep tithing, only if you keep kneeling. And the cruel truth is this: the more you chase her approval, the more invisible you become to yourself. But here's the question you need to face. What happens to a man when his entire identity is built on validation that can vanish overnight? When her rejection, her silence, or her betrayal rips the ground out from under him? That's the collapse. That's where we're headed next. Every man watching this knows the feeling. You hit the gym, you buy the clothes, you send the text, you crack the joke, and the moment she smiles, the moment she laughs, you feel alive. For a second, you believe you matter, and then the high fades, and you're left chasing it again. This is the trap Nietzsche warned about, not in the shallow sense of women are the enemy, but in the deeper sense of how men enslave themselves through their need for female validation. He understood what most men today refuse to face. When your worth depends on her reaction, you're no longer a man, you're a beggar. Here's the brutal truth Nietzsche forces us to face. Once your worth is defined by her gaze, you no longer have a self. You have only a reflection. This is the collapse of the inner frame, when a man no longer moves from his own center, but reacts only to the approval or disapproval of others, especially women. It's the invisible slavery that looks like romance, like devotion, even like being a good man. But in reality, it's the death of sovereignty. Think about it. The moment her attention makes you feel alive, you're dead the second it's gone. One unanswered text, one cold glance, one rejection, and suddenly you spiral. Your confidence crumbles, your purpose feels meaningless, your masculinity is in question. Why? Because your entire identity was being outsourced to her. Nietzsche called this a sickness of the will. A man without his own compass latches onto external anchors. Instead of creating values, he borrows them. Instead of walking his own path, he begs for permission to take the next step. And the most seductive anchor of all is her eyes. History is full of empires, leaders, even warriors who were destroyed not by enemies, but by this collapse. Think of Mark Antony, conqueror, statesman, feared by Rome. Yet when Cleopatra's approval became his oxygen, his empire slipped through his fingers. A man who once commanded armies could no longer command himself. He lost Rome because he lost his frame. And this is where the modern man finds himself. You think you're free because you can chase women on apps, post thirst traps online, or flex at the gym. But freedom isn't chasing. Freedom is choosing. And the man whose self-esteem depends on being chosen has no freedom at all. When her eyes define your worth, you're not even in a relationship with her. You're in a relationship with your own insecurity, mirrored through her. Every smile feels like salvation. Every silence feels like hell. That isn't love, that's bondage. But this collapse doesn't end with her. Once you lose your frame, society itself becomes your master. Advertisers, influencers, politicians, even strangers on the internet, all of them become mirrors you perform for. You no longer live, you audition. This is why so many men today are exhausted. Not because life is harder, but because they are constantly performing for validation. And Nietzsche's warning is clear. If you don't reclaim your frame, if you don't root your worth inside yourself, you will spend your life as a shadow of what you could have been, with a deep well of resentment building up within you, threatening to overspill. Here's the brutal truth. If you stay trapped in resentment, you've still lost. Because resentment is just the negative shadow of the same problem. You're still letting her define you. Worship bows to her power. Resentment bows to her betrayal. Either way, you're on your knees. Nietzsche's escape is this: stop living for women altogether. Stop living for their approval, their validation, their acceptance, their gaze. He saw that the strongest men, the sovereign men, were not those who hated women or adored them, but those who built their worth on a foundation no one could touch. Nietzsche called this the Übermensch, the man who creates his own values instead of borrowing them. And this is where most men fail. They think freedom means avoiding women, or controlling them, or rejecting them. But true freedom is deeper. It's building yourself so completely that whether she smiles or she betrays, your core remains untouched. Think about Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. He endured betrayal, loss, and political chaos. Yet he wrote in his meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The validation of others, even the people closest to him, did not define his sovereignty. He chose reality over worship. Nietzsche pushes this even further. He warns that man must face the void within himself, the hollow space he has tried to fill with women's approval, and then build from it, not run from it, not mask it with resentment, but confront it and create. He writes, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." In other words, when you live for something higher than her gaze, her validation becomes irrelevant. But here's the twist. Choosing reality doesn't mean despising women. That's still a chain. It means seeing them clearly as humans with their own drives, their own chaos, their own contradictions, not as goddesses to worship or demons to resent. It means standing face to face with her shadow and refusing to bow. Men who walk this path discover a strange freedom. The same attention that once felt like oxygen now feels optional. The same betrayal that once shattered them now barely scratches their core. Because when you are rooted in reality, your own mission, your own standard, your own values, no external storm can topple you. This is what Nietzsche meant by choosing reality over worship. It's not about becoming cold or detached or bitter. It's about finally ending the game where women's approval defines your worth. It's about becoming untouchable, not by isolation, but by inner sovereignty. And here's the ultimate reversal. When you no longer need validation, when you stop worshiping women altogether, that's when you become most magnetic, because strength, sovereignty, and groundedness are rare, and rare men are irresistible. So here we are. Let me ask you directly, are you still kneeling? Maybe not with your body, but with your soul. Do you still hand women the keys to your worth, waiting for her approval to make you feel alive? Do you still let her silence feel like a rejection of your very existence? If that's you, hear this. You are not alone. Most men are caught in this invisible trap. Nietzsche saw it in his own time. Freud wrote about it in his analysis of desire, and Kierkegaard warned against it in his reflections on despair. It is the oldest chain on the male heart, the illusion that she completes you. But what if you refused to kneel? What if, instead of living for her eyes, you built a life so rooted in strength, discipline, and vision that her gaze became a bonus, never the foundation? That's the shift Nietzsche demanded. He didn't want you to hate women. He wanted you to stop worshiping them. Think of Leonidas at Thermopylae, 300 men standing against an empire. They weren't validated by numbers, by popularity, by approval. They stood because their standard was their own. Or think of Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz, who said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That is what sovereignty looks like. A man who no longer kneels. So here's the reversal. You thought her love would make you whole. You thought her approval would silence the emptiness. But the truth is, she was only ever a mirror, reflecting back the value you either had or didn't. And if you didn't, no amount of validation could save you. This is the call, not to run from women, not to despise them, but to stop kneeling before them, to build so deeply from within that when you stand before her, whether she desires you, betrays you, or ignores you, your core remains untouched because your worth was never hers to give. This isn't just a video, it's a turning point, so subscribe and share.